Hello, dear students. Myself Sunita. Welcome to this session. In today's session, we shall be looking into the details of the kingdom Mycota, as we have learned the characteristic features in our previous session. So basically, kingdom Mycota is, or fungi, is divided into four important classes, that is Phycomycetes, Ascomycetes, Basidiomycetes, and Deuteromycetes. So after learning about the different classifications, we have understood that the third kingdom is Mycota. So Mycota has more advanced characters when compared to kingdom Monera and kingdom Protista. Likewise, after kingdom Mycota, we also should learn about kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animaliae, which completes the five kingdom system, which was proposed by R.H. Whittaker. So we shall also be looking into kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animaliae, a bit of details in today's session, as you will be studying those two as a separate chapters in chapter 3 and chapter 4. So let us go ahead and look into our first class, that is class Phycomycetes. Class Phycomycetes is also called as primitive fungi. It's also called as algal fungi. So there are other names for this. Phycomycetes is also called as Zygomycetes. The word phycos means algae. The word phycos means algae. Myx, as I told you, it is nothing but fungi. So it is called as algal fungi because it shows the resemblance of that of algae. And since it is the primitive among the other members of fungi, it's called as primitive fungi. When we look into the thallus body, it is cylindrical in nature. And we know that the body of fungi is made up of the long thread-like slender structures, which is called as hyphae. In case of Phycomycetes, it is cylindrical and aseptate, that is without the presence of cross walls. There are no cross walls. And it is branched. It is branched and cenocytic in nature. So we also know that cenocyte means multinucleate condition without any septal formation. So there are many nuclei which are present in the hyphae, and this condition is called as cenocytic hyphae. So multinucleate aseptal condition is known as cenocytic hyphae in the cytoplasm with eukaryotic organelles. So since it possesses eukaryotic nature of cell, so the organelles with respect to these organisms is also eukaryotic in nature. Like, as I said, they have membrane bound organelles which are present in them. Coming to the cell wall, basically the cell wall is made up of cellulose. And this cellulose is called as fungal cellulose. Cellulose is also present in case of the plant cell, but in case of fungal cell, it is called as fungal cellulose, along with certain amount of polysaccharides are also present within them. So since this character is resembling that of the plant, even algae also has cellulose, which is made up of, which the cell wall is made up of. So it is also called as Phycomycetes, that is algal fungi, because it shows one of the characteristic feature possessed by algae. Coming to the habitat, these fungi are aquatic in nature. They are also present in decaying woods. They are also grown where there is moist and damp places where there is more amount of water, and most of it are parasitic in nature, present on the plants. These parasites are called as obligate parasites. The word obligate means strictly. That means they are specific in nature. So they prefer a particular host for them to reside on. So hence they are called as obligate parasites. They strictly depend on a particular host body. Especially in case of phycomycetes, they are obligate parasites on plants. They depend on plants for their absorption and further for their nutrition. Certain examples of phycomycetes are Rhizopus and Mucor. Mucor, you would have heard because it is a disease-causing fungi called as mucosis, which may be white fungus or black fungus or different types of fungus, which may be causing damage to the body. And Rhizopus is called as, in other words, bread mold. So commonly when we keep the bread without proper covering or when the moisture is absorbed by the bread, so immediately the fungus grows there. And especially it is obligate to the bread. It's an obligate parasite on the bread. Hence it is called as bread mold. So this is the structure in the microscopic view. So you can see here the growth of the bread mold, that is Rhizopus. And also you can make out that the branched filament or branched hyphae in case of Rhizopus and Mucor, which is having multinucleate condition with no septal formation. And also the membrane bound organelles are present here, like nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, and vacuole, along with the cell wall, which is made up of the fungal cellulose. The cell wall is made up of fungal cellulose. Coming to the reproduction. So the reproduction is by two means. One is asexual reproduction, another one is by sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is by presence of spores which are motile in nature, and we know that the motile spores are called as zoospores. And also some of the spores may be non-motile in nature. They are called as aplanospores. So the asexual reproduction either may be through zoospores or through aplanospores. And these spores are born in a sac-like structure. So you can make out here, this is the sac-like structure, which is called as sporangium. Sporangium. The sporangium is a sac-like structure. It's a sac-like structure which produces spores inside. So the spores are present inside each sac. If this is a sac, the spores are produced inside, and these spores which are produced inside are called as sporangiospores. They are called as sporangiospores. The spores present inside the sporangium is called as sporangiospores. And also we can see that the sporangiospores are held by a long stalk, and this long stalk of hyphae, which is multinucleate cenocytic in nature, is called as sporangiophore. Is called as sporangiophore. Sporangiospores are the spores which are present inside. Sporangiophore is the stalk which bears the sporangium. And since the spores are produced inside, they are called as endogenous. So the spores are produced endogenously. That means they are present inside the sac-like structure. And all these spores which are present inside the sac-like structure are non-motile spores. They are non-motile spores. And this forms the sexual reproduction in case of Phycomycetes. So going ahead with the next group. In case of Phycomycetes, during the process of sexual reproduction, especially during the unfavorable conditions, a spore is going to be formed by fusion of gametes, and that is called as zygospore. So zygospore is formed by fusion of two gametes which are of opposite strains, and when two hyphae meet together of opposite strain, if we say it as plus and this is of minus strain, and they are going to undergo the process of mating. So when they undergo the process of mating, the plasmogamy occurs, then the karyogamy occurs, and later the meiosis will occur. So before meiosis is formed, it forms a spore-like structures. These spores are present inside and they are called as zygospore. Since zygospore is produced in Phycomycetes, the group is also called as Zygomycetes. It's also called as Phycomycetes, or it is also called as Zygomycetes. And coming to the gametes now, you can see the reproduction. So meiosis undergoes, the zygospore undergoes meiosis to form haploid spores. Later, these haploid spores are going to germinate individually to form the hyphae, and two or more hyphae together undergoes the process of mating of different strains, and the fusion will happen. First, the plasmogamy will happen, and then the nuclear fusion will happen. That is how the zygospore is formed, and the life cycle will continue. The zygospore is generally diploid in nature, which undergoes meiosis to form haploid spores. And haploid hyphae is going to form after mating. They once again become diploid in nature. And this is the microscopic view of the hardened spore, which is called as zygospore. So sexual reproduction is by fusion of gametes. They may be either by same gametes, same size of gametes, called as isogamy. Iso means similar. So they have similar gametes in morphology. Similar gametes in morphology. Morphology is external appearance. Or they may be dissimilar in their morphological appearance. So they are called as anisogamy. Dissimilar gametes in morphology. So they are called as anisogamy. In anisogamy, we do not generally differentiate it as male or female. Whereas in case of the third group, even though they are dissimilar in the morphology, we say it as male and female. We refer it to as male and female. But in anisogamy, we don't refer it to as male and female. So anisogamous and oogamous type both have dissimilar gametes in morphology, whereas isogametes have similar gametes in morphology. Iso means similar, aniso means different. In case of oogamy, you can see here, it is between the sperm, which is forming the male gamete, and the egg is the female gamete, which undergoes the process of fusion or fertilization. So the type of gamete formation or the type of reproduction is called as oogamous type of reproduction, or the process is called as oogamy. And as you can see here in anisogamy, one is larger in size, another one is smaller in size. We do not mention it as egg or sperm. Generally, in case of oogamy, the egg will be larger in size and small will be smaller in size. When we talk about the motility, sperm is motile and egg is immotile. Then comes isogamy. So isogamous type, both the gametes are similar in their morphology. So this is regarding the sexual reproduction in phycomycetes. Now let us look into the examples with regard to phycomycetes. So the typical example is Rhizopus stolonifer, which is also called as bread mold. It's in common called as bread mold. And few other examples with regard to are mucor and then albigo. Albigo is a parasite which generally appears on the mustard leaf. On the leaf of mustard family, it appears. So it's a parasite. It's a parasitic fungi. We know that the fungi may be either parasitic or it may be saprophytic. Generally, albigo is a parasitic fungi. Okay, you can see the white dots patches which has been formed. And this is because of the fungi which is appearing in whitish in color. So these are some of the examples of Phycomycetes. Now let us go ahead with Ascomycetes. Ascomycetes in common is called as sac fungi because the spores are produced again in the sac-like structure. When we look into the structure, you'll be understanding much better. They are multicellular in rate. Most of the ascomycetes are multicellular, but they are rarely unicellular. One typical example of unicellular ascomycetes is yeast. Yeast. So yeast is the only example for a fungi which is unicellular, but all other fungi are multicellular in nature. Coming to the habitat, basically they are saprophytic in nature, and these are highly saprophytic and they grow on the dung. They grow on the cow dung. Henceforth, they are called as coprophilous. So coprophilous means the fungi which grows on cow dung. It's called as coprophilous. And some of them may be parasitic in nature. Coming to the hyphae, generally the hyphae is branched. They may be branched and they may be having even cross walls. So they are septate in nature. Okay. So this is regarding the body structure. Let's move ahead with the reproduction. The reproduction mode is more advanced when compared to phycomycetes. They have different modes of reproduction like cell division, budding in case of yeast. You know that the yeast is a unicellular fungi which undergoes the process of budding. The parental plant and the daughter will be separated. The daughter will be forming a new thallus body when it obtains the favorable condition. Okay, this process is called as budding, and the external buds are going to be formed. These are the external buds in the parental plant. One second. So these are the buds. They are present externally, and they are going to be forming the new fungal body. So that process is called as budding. Then comes one more type of asexual reproduction, that is the formation of conidiospores, which are also in the conidia, just like sporangium contains sporangiospores in case of phycomycetes. The typical examples for the spores which are produced, especially the conidiospores, are penicillium and aspergillus. Conidiophores are just like the sporangiospores, which are erect in nature. They are erect and they are going to be developing from horizontal hyphae. This is the horizontal hyphae. So from the horizontal hyphae, just a second. So from the horizontal hyphae, the conidiophore will be arising. Then it's a long stalk. Here, the conidia are exogenously produced, whereas in case of sporangiospores, they were endogenously produced. The spores here are found outside. They are exogenously produced. Okay. And these spores are called as conidiospores. They are called as conidiospores. And the structure which bears is called as conidia. Right? And each conidia, when they fall onto the substratum, when each conidia fall onto the substratum, they are going to germinate into a hyphae. Okay, which again is having the septa, and then it is going to be branching. So this is how the asexual reproduction will take place. Coming to the, yes, you can see the diagram. So this is what I was telling you. The conidium is present outside. Conidium is a sac-like structure which bears the conidiospores inside, and they are exogenously produced and they are not endogenously produced. And this is conidiophore, a stalk-like structure. So this is how the penicillium will generally look when they are grown on the Petri plates or the Petri dishes by giving the media. Coming to the sexual reproduction, the sexual spores are called as ascospores. These ascospores are produced in a sac-like structure. The sac-like structure is called as asci. The sac-like structure is called as asci, and the spores which are produced inside them are called as ascospores. So these are ascospores which are produced in the asci. Okay, this individual is called as ascospore. These are ascospores, and what you're seeing here is asci. There are many asci. Asci is a plural. There are many asci, which are generally 8 in number, and 8 ascospores are produced in each. Okay, here only 4 I have represented. 8 ascospores are present, and this asci is arranged in a fruiting body, and that fruiting body is called as ascocarp. Is called as ascocarp. So ascocarp is a fruiting body which contains asci, and in each asci, ascospores are produced. So they are the sexual spores. So when the sexual spores are going to germinate, they are going to produce mycelium, and further they will undergo the asexual reproduction, or they may mate with the other strain, and then later they may form into the sexual cycle, that is fusion of two hyphae between motile and non-motile is called as plasmogamy, fusion of protoplasm, then followed by karyogamy, and then meiosis. Remember that after plasmogamy and karyogamy, between plasmogamy and karyogamy, there is one phase which is called as dikaryotic phase, where the nuclei is not undergoing immediate fusion. The nuclei there is called as dikaryon, and later they fuse together, and then they undergo the karyogamy and followed by meiosis. Once again, the spores which are going to be formed as 4, they are undergoing twice the meiotic division to form 8 ascospores. 8 ascospores are going to be formed, lined in a manner, and then these are going to disperse and germinate to complete their life cycle. So this is regarding the sexual reproduction in ascomycetes. Typical examples of ascomycetes. So you can see here the budding from the east. So this is the parental body, and these are the buds, which are exogenous in nature. I mean, the buds are external in nature. So Saccharomyces cerevisiae is yeast. It is the only unicellular fungi. Only unicellular fungi. This is the microscopic view. Both are microscopic view. One is with the colored image. Then comes Aspergillus. So you can see the conidia, which are present exogenously. Then Claviceps is one more example. You can see the asci, and in each asci, the ascospores are produced and the fruiting body is also seen. This is the fruiting body. The Neurospora, very important about Neurospora is an fungi which is genetically used. Okay, it is extensively used in biochemistry or in biochemical experiments, and also for genetic study as a modern organism, also in genetic work. So these are typical examples of Ascomycetes, along with two more, that is morels and truffles. So morels and truffles are edible ascomycetes in especially the continental places. Going ahead with the class Basidiomycetes. Basidiomycetes are commonly called as club fungi because of the shape of basidia. Just like the ascospores were present in ascite, here the basidiospores are produced in basidium. The basidium is basically a club-shaped structure. This is the club-shaped. This is how they appear, and henceforth they are called as club fungi. In these club fungi, majority of them are edible. Mushrooms come under this group. They are edible mushrooms. They are all saprophytic in nature. They are going to depend on dead and decayed organic matter. Some of the saprophytes include mushrooms, bracket fungi, puffballs, which grow in the soil or on logs or tree stumps or tree stems. Okay, so that is the nature where they grow. That is the habitat where they dwell in. Some of them are even parasitic in nature. You can see both the groups, saprophytes as well as parasitic. Parasites includes the rust fungi, which is coming under the group called as Fuchsinia, and then the smut fungi, which comes under the group called as Eustylago. Hyphae is generally branched. So you can see the branching of the hyphae, and also it is septate in nature. So, but in case of the nuclei, which is present, there is single nucleus. There is single nucleus in each septa. Okay, so that is one of the things which you have to remember in case of Basidiomycetes. Coming to the reproduction. In case of reproduction, the asexual spores are absent. Very important. Asexual spores are absent in case of these group of organisms. That means no asexual reproduction. There is no asexual reproduction. Whereas in case of sexual reproduction, other than sexual reproduction, there is even vegetative reproduction. The vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation. So you can see that this hyphae is forming into fragments. Each of these fragments, they will grow into a new thalli body. Okay, each of these are going to undergo the process of fragmentation. They are going to be forming into again a branched hyphae, and that is how the mycelium is going to be formed. So this is fragmentation. Then comes sexual reproduction. The sexual reproduction is generally without the sex organs. The sex organs are absent. The sex organs are absent, but sexual reproduction is by sexual spores, which are present exogenously. The spores are produced in the structures which are called as basidium. Each basidium is going to produce 4 sexual spores, and those spores are called as basidiospores. Remember, in case of Ascomycetes, these sexual spores, ascospores, were endogenously present, that is inside the asci, whereas here they are exogenously present, that is outside the basidium. Okay, so that is the difference between Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes. So you can see the life cycle here. The mycelium, which undergoes mating, the fusion of protoplasm, they form dikaryon. The stage is called as dikaryotic mycelium. The dikaryotic mycelium will later undergo the process of formation of the plant body, the fruiting body. The fruiting body here, the fruiting body is called as basidiocarp. Earlier, in case of Ascomycetes, it was called as ascocarp. Here, the fruiting body is called as basidiocarp, which is again a dikaryotic phase. So what we generally observe is the dikaryotic phase, that is basidiocarp in case of mushrooms, which you are going to consume as an edible product, right? So you can see the gills which are present, and also inside at the lower surface, they are having the basidia. So you can see the basidia. So this is the hyphae. Outside the basidia, the basidiospores are produced. Okay, so outside it is produced, henceforth it is called as exogenous in manner. It is produced outside. And later these basidia, they are undergoing karyogamy, that is fusion of nucleus, and further undergoes meiosis. So during the process of meiosis, 4 haploid nuclei are going to form 4 haploid spores. And these basidiospores are further undergoing germination. They disperse and undergo germination to form a new thallus body or new mycelium, and the process will continue. So you can see the basidiocarp in this picture as well. So this is how it will complete the sexual reproduction. Then coming to the next group, before that, we'll go ahead with the examples. Some of the examples is agaricus. It's an edible mushroom. Then you might have seen on the tree logs, tree stems, the bracket fungi which have been grown in this way. And yes, this is what I was telling you, the gills region where you see the basidium, basidiospores which are arranged. Okay. And then one more typical example is puff balls, which is also a type of Basidiomycetes. Few more examples of parasitic forms are Eustilago. Eustilago is a smut fungi which generally affects the maize plant or the corn cobs. Then one more is Fuchsinia, which is called as rust fungi. So you can see the rust appearance, which is brownish in color. So these markations or lesions are due to the presence of the rust fungi. Okay, brownish lesions are because of rust fungi. So going ahead with the last group, that is class Deuteromycetes. So in case of Deuteromycetes, it's called as fungi imperfecti, or it is also called as imperfect fungi. So why is it called as fungi imperfecti or imperfect fungi? Is because it has only asexual and vegetative phase, but no sexual reproduction at all. No sexual reproduction at all. No sexual reproduction at all. So earlier, some of the fungi were grouped, which were grouped under Deuteromycetes wild classification, they did not show the sexual reproduction at all. So since they do not show any sexual reproduction, they had to be retained in Deuteromycetes. But some of them, when they were grouped under this that is in Deuteromycetes, some of them they showed the sexual reproduction, and the characteristic features were similar to that of ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. So henceforth, they were rearranged back to ascomycetes and in case of basidiomycetes. But deuteromycetes are the only group of fungi which is not having any sexual reproduction. Okay, so during the reshuffling, this was something which was in common observed. So no sexual reproduction in case of deuteromycetes, hence they are called as fungi imperfecti, or they are also called as imperfect fungi. So that means only asexual reproduction is taking place, and also vegetative reproduction is present in them. Asexual reproduction is by, again, the conidia, which were also the asexual spores in case of Basidiomycetes. So Basidiomycetes also possess asexual spores like conidia. Even Deuteromycetes possess the asexual spores like conidia. When we talk about the hyphae, so it's again similar to that of ascomycetes. That is why during the classification system, it was bit confusing, because most of the characteristics were same except for the process of sexual reproduction. So that is why the reshuffling and the rearrangement had to be done. So they are branched. So these are branched, and they have the cross walls or the septa with the single nucleus which are present in them. Okay, single nucleus which are present in them. Right. Then coming to the mode of nutrition. So mode of nutrition is two types. One is they are saprophytic mode, the other one is parasitic mode. So majority of them are saprophytes. They are decomposers of litter and help in mineral cycling. So they go on consuming the litter, and you know that decomposition is one of the major process during the mineral recycling. So henceforth, they are major contributors as the decomposers. So those organisms which are going to decompose the litter, they are called as detritus. They're called as detritus, or they are nothing but decomposers of litter. And they also help in mineral recycling. Likewise, some of them are even parasitic forms. So as I said earlier, the reproduction is only asexual means, and vegetative phase is also present. So asexual reproduction is by conidia, which are nothing but serving as asexual spores. So this is it regarding class Deuteromycetes. Now let us look into some of the examples which are going to be shown here. And remember that the sexual stage of any members are called as the perfect stage, which are not observed in case of Deuteromycetes. Hence, they are called as fungi imperfecti or imperfect fungi. Some of the examples include Alternaria. So in Alternaria, you can see the hyphae here. The hyphae is also arising into the asexual spores. These asexual spores are called as conidia. Okay, each conidium, each hyphae is branched and it is septate. You can see the septa, cross walls are present here. And what you see here is the conidium which is present in them. And this is what you're seeing in a highlighted way. Okay, Alternaria, it's a parasitic form. Next, Coleotrichum. So Coleotrichum, these organisms are going to affect majorly the legumes, leguminous plants, which includes peas, beans, etc. So they are also going to be parasite on the plants. Then lastly, Trichoderma. Trichoderma is a Deuteromycetes, which is used as a biofertilizer. So trichoderma is used as an organic fertilizer to improve the soil quality and also to improve the fertility of the crops, fertility of the soil, in turn yield of the crops. You can see the hyphae. So the hyphae is branched. You can see the branching, and also the septa formation. You can see the cross walls here and there, and also the conidia which are produced exogenously. Okay, Conidia which are produced exogenously. Right. So we have completed with the kingdom Mycota. Then let's go ahead with kingdom Plantae. So as I said, kingdom Plantae will be dealt in the next chapter, that is plant kingdom, in a detailed manner. But here we'll be looking into some of the highlights of kingdom Plantae. Likewise, even kingdom Animaliae will be dealt in a not in a broader way, only a few general characters we are going to discuss, and it will be dealt in the chapter 4, that is animal kingdom, in a detailed manner. So let us look into some of the characteristic features of kingdom Plantae. So after kingdom Mycota comes kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animaliae, which was proposed by the two kingdom classification given by Carolus Linnaeus. So according to Linnaeus classification, kingdom Plantae includes all the plants and kingdom Animaliae includes all the animals. So do remember that kingdom Plantae is also called as Metaphyta. It's also called as Metaphyta, and Animalia is called as Metazoa. So we know that plants are eukaryotic in nature. They are chlorophyll containing organisms. So they are chlorophyllous. They are chlorophyllous. Hence, they can prepare their own food. They can prepare their own food. But there are few exceptions, that some of them are even achlorophyllous. We can say that they are not going to prepare their own food. They are partially heterotrophic, even though the body structure is greenish in color, because in few areas they are going to be having the chlorophyll pigment, the green body, but in some areas they are partially heterotrophic. That is, they are going to depend on the other organisms for food. Especially one group is the insectivorous plants. So insectivorous plants are going to be grown in areas which are nitrogen deficient. Generally in the soil, we know that plants have to be dependent on nitrogen. They have to fix atmospheric nitrogen. So nitrogen cannot be taken directly from the atmosphere. They have to be fixed in the form of nitrates and ammonia. So which enriches the soil habitat or the soil quality. So, but these organisms are going to be surviving or going to be growing in nitrogen deficient areas. So henceforth, they are dependent on nitrogen. Then where do they obtain nitrogen? They are going to eat the insects. We know that insects also has the nitrogen content in the form of ammonia, right? So henceforth, they are going to consume the insects, obtain the nitrogen, and that is how they are going to survive. Since they are dependent on other organisms for food, they are called as heterotrophic organisms. And insectivorous plants are going to be growing in nitrogen deficient areas. Some of the typical examples of the insectivorous plants include, the first picture which you're seeing is the bladderwort. Bladderwort. And the second picture which you're seeing is Venus flytrap. Venus flytrap. Other examples may include even pitcher plant, which is called as Nepenthes. Right? So these are the typical examples of insectivorous plants. Then there are even some plants which are parasitic in nature, even though we know that other organisms are going to depend on plants for as a parasite. But here we have separate group of plants which are going to be parasitic. That is, they will be depending on the other plant body. Okay, they are called as parasites. So we have even plant parasites. These are plant parasites. One typical example of plant parasite is Cuscuta. So Cuscuta, you can see the yellow colorations here. This is a plant parasite which will be growing on other plants for food. So they are completely achlorophyllous. That is, they do not have any pigment present in them. They are achlorophyllous. So they depend on nourishment by being a parasite on other plant body. So that is how they are going to obtain the food. So typical example of parasitic plant is Cuscuta. Few other characters are, they show eukaryotic structures. The plants show eukaryotic structure with a prominent chloroplast and nucleus. The cell wall is generally made up of cellulose, right? And it depends on the type of plant whether the other types of cell wall materials like pectin, lignin, hemicellulose may be present or may not be present. When we look into the classification of plants, it starts from algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, which you'll be learning in next chapter. Coming to the life cycle of the plants, the life cycle of the plants depends, but basically there are two important generations which is followed by the plants to complete their life cycle. One is called as the haploid generation, and the other one is called as diploid generation. Haploid generation is generally having a single set of chromosomes. Diploid generation will be having a complete set of chromosomes. So in case of haploid generation, the haploid generation is called as gametophyte, that is gamete producing body. Gametophyte, gamete producing body. And the diploid generation is called as sporophyte, the spore producing body. So gametophyte, later after the formation of gametophyte, it is going to form the diploid sporophyte, and diploid sporophyte in turn will form gametophyte, and that is how it completes its life cycle. So the life cycle pattern in case of plants goes on alternating with one another. So hence it is called as alternation of generation. It is called as alternation of generations. Okay, so this is how the life cycle pattern will be followed. So much more details will be dealt later about the plants and plant kingdom. Going ahead with kingdom Animaliae, we know that kingdom Animaliae is also called as metazoa. Do remember protozoans were called as lower animals, primitive animals, whereas metazoans are called as higher animals. All the animals are multicellular in nature. They are heterotrophic, eukaryotic in their organization. And when we take the differences between plant cell and animal cell, the animal cell lack the cell wall. They do not possess any cell wall. Henceforth, the plasma membrane serves as the outermost boundary for an animal cell. Then comes the mode of nutrition. They are dependent directly or indirectly on the plants for food. They may be either herbivorous, or they may be carnivorous, or they may be even omnivorous. The digestion is generally through the internal cavity, which is called as the gut or the alimentary canal. So the process of digestion may be intracellular or extracellular. It is within the cell or outside the cell, that is in the body cavity. Coming to the reserve food material, the reserve food material in case of plants will be the starch, and in case of animal, it will be in the form of fat or glycogen. So the mode of nutrition may be holozoic, that is, they are going to ingest the food, eat the food, okay? And the ingestion of food may be differing with one organism to another organism, depend on the type of the mouth or the arrangement of the teeth they have. Coming to the growth pattern, they follow a definite growth pattern and grow into adults that have definite shape and size. So it again depends on the type of animal species to what height or the structure it is going to grow. Some higher forms which they exhibit is the sensory mechanism. They have sense organs, and they also have neuromotor mechanism. So they can easily understand things, and the brain can sense, and then that is how they can send the signals and the actions can be done. So they have both sensory and neuromotor mechanism. One important feature which animals shows is the capability of locomotion. They're able to move from one region to another region. So that process is called as locomotion, which was absent in case of plants. Lastly, the sexual reproduction. The sexual reproduction is by mating, or it is also called as copulation, mating or copulation of male and female. And they may be in the form of oviparous, egg laying, or they may be in the form of viviparous, that is, they give birth to young ones, which is followed by the embryonic development. Okay, to develop into the fetus will later develop into the young one. So these are some of the characteristic features of kingdom Animaliae. Now let us solve some question pertaining to the topic which we have discussed in this session. First question, algal fungi are placed in. We know that algal fungi are also called as Phycomycetes. So phycomycetes, the word phycos means algae, myx means fungi. So henceforth, option is Phycomycetes. And we also know that Ascomycetes is called as sac fungi. Basidiomycetes are called as club fungi. Deuteromycetes are called as imperfect fungi or fungi imperfecti. So henceforth the option is option C. Next question. In Rhizopus, hyphae are. So do remember the hyphae in case of Phycomycetes. So in case of Phycomycetes, the hyphae was without the cross walls and multinucleate condition. And they were branched as well. Okay. So henceforth the option here will be option B. Next question. Coprophilous fungi grows on. You know that the word coprophilous means the fungi which grows on cow dung or just the dung. So henceforth here the option is called as option D. Going ahead with the next question. Sac fungi includes what? So sac fungi is basically Ascomycetes, they include Penicillium yeast, Ustilago-Fuccinia, Alternaria trichoderma, Coleotrichum, and yeast. We know that sac fungi is basically Penicillium and yeast. So henceforth the option is A. Ustilago and Fuccinia, they belong to Basidiomycetes. Alternaria and Trichoderma belongs to Deuteromycetes. Coleotrichum belongs to Deuteromycetes and yeast belongs to Ascomycetes. So henceforth option A is the correct one. Next question. Fungus used in genetic experiments. So we know that the only fungus which we have discussed and is used in genetic experiments is Neurospora. So Neurospora is both used in genetic experiments and also in biochemical experiments. Right? Next question. Which of the following is an edible fungi? So when we talk about edible fungi, we know that mucor, which belongs to Phycomycetes, is not edible. Instead, it is going to cause disease. It is going to cause diseases. So henceforth, it is not edible. When we look into penicillium, you might be knowing that penicillium is the first, from penicillium, the first antibiotic was produced, that is penicillin. The first antibiotic which was produced by Alexander Fleming from the organism called as Penicillium notatum. Penicillium notatum. So we know that since it is useful in antibiotics, so henceforth, this option is also not appropriate. Whereas next one is agaricus. We know that agaricus is mushroom, and not all mushrooms are edible. There are even some poisonous mushrooms, but the group which edible fungi belong to is mushrooms. Okay, mushrooms are edible, especially agaricus is edible. And we know that Rhizopus is called as bread mold. It grows on the bread, it spoils the bread, henceforth it cannot be consumed. Okay, so henceforth the option is option C. Next question. Sexual reproduction is present in all fungi except, you know that sexual reproduction is most prominent in all the fungi except for Deuteromycetes. So the word deuteros means imperfect. Mycetes is fungi. So hence Deuteromycetes is called as imperfect fungi. So going ahead with the next question. Fruiting bodies are produced by. Do remember the fruiting bodies are produced by which group? Do we have it in algal fungi? We didn't discuss about the fruiting bodies, just spoke about the asexual spores and the sexual spores. But in case of Ascomycetes, the fruiting body was called as ascocarp. In case of Basidiomycetes, the fruiting body was called as Basidiocarp. But whereas in Deuteromycetes, there were no sexual reproduction, henceforth no fruiting bodies. So henceforth it is present in only Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes. So when we look into the options, algal fungi is the Phycomycetes, so hence we have to rule out this. Fungi and higher plants we have not discussed, so we have to rule out. So sac fungi is Ascomycetes and club fungi is Basidiomycetes. So hence our option will be option C. Algal and fungi imperfecti cannot be the options. So next question. We need to match the following accordingly with the examples and the classes which they belong to. Know that albugo belongs to the Phycomycetes. Aspergillus belongs to Ascomycetes. Eustilago belongs to Basidiomycetes. Alternaria belongs to Deuteromycetes. So henceforth, the option here will be A is 4, B is 1, C is 2, and D is 3. The option C is the correct one. Let's move on to the last few questions. Cuscuta. You know that Cuscuta is a plant parasite. Okay, it's not a symbiont, it's not a saprophyte, it's not a fungus, it belongs to a plant parasite. So let us go ahead with the last question. Kingdom Animalia includes, so Kingdom Animalia, we have discussed the characteristic feature. They are heterotrophic in nature. They are eukaryotic organisms. They are multicellular organisms. So all three options are right. So henceforth, all of the above is the correct option. Okay, all of the above is the correct option. Right. So we have completed with the few groups, few kingdoms from starting from Plantae and Animalia along with the Mycota. So we shall see in the next class more about the topics which are included in the chapter biological classification. Thank you, students. Meet you in the next session.